Yeah.
All right. Thanks. Sorry about that.
We'll just keep monitoring it. Yeah. Okay. So one thing I'd like to cover before I show you the just quick demo of how this works is it does get a little bit confusing with all the terminology. So I think we all hear things like SSO, provisioning, central management, and then there's all three. Some services just offer single sign-on, so that's literally just using one set of credentials. And in order for those to work, usually you have to create the users on both sides. So like if I don't have provisioning, I only have single sign-on, then I would have to have my account, Tony DePreto, at my email in G Suite, and I would have to have my account, Tony DePreto, in Azure, and they would need to be the same email address, and then I can use single sign-on, but that is a lot of extra work. There's also provisioning, which means you're giving one system the power to add users to the other system if those users do not already exist. So that's normally how it works. I've never seen it where it erases users. And provisioning saves you a lot of time if you set it up correctly. But sometimes the main issue with provisioning is one system like Azure provisioning to G Suite, which you'll see in a bit, the mappings for groups and organizational units don't always work correctly. And that's really because of the syntax and the way both of those different vendors decide how to put people in the groups and how group naming and numbering works. Then there are central management systems, which we may not have a lot of time to get into. I mentioned two before in an email. One is Jump Cloud and one is Clever. I know a lot of schools use Clever. Clever does more than, it does mostly like rosters, but with central management, you take your credentials maybe from G Suite or from Azure, you push them into the central management system, and now that system can provision your users or allow single sign-on or whatever you want for all your other vendors. And then if you decide you don't want to use the central management system anymore, you can disconnect it and you still have your original directory. So that means that you can give permission to another vendor to manage everything as long as you're happy with them. And if you're not, you can take it back and find another vendor. And that's very flexible. And there's a lot of new options now. So for example, Jump Cloud, and I'm mentioning Jump Cloud because I've used them very extensively. They had Active Directory in the cloud, LDAP services, radius authentication. When you gave users permission, it made their Office 365 accounts for you automatically. There are more and more services like that now. They're not free though, and usually if a school has their Azure license and their G Suite license, they can do what we're going to do today, free or very affordably. All right, so if there are no questions, I want to jump into just what this looks like. So I'm in my Azure here. Now, this Azure is set up in a hybrid, and I've stated before, I don't really like the hybrid scenario. This is being phased out over the summer because in the hybrid scenario, you have a lot of limitations. And one of those limitations is where groups are created and how groups are assigned. So it gets very annoying when you want to use advanced features. They're just simply not available. But we haven't had a big issue because we're only using limited areas of G Suite. We're not using Gmail. We're not using Google Groups. So that works for us. But I think best practices, if you can, have a P1 or P3 Azure license and use that to do this. And you're going to find that you have a lot more features. The other thing is most of the training and tutorials online seem to not involve the hybrid scenario. So you get into stuff and you can't find the option because you don't have it, because you don't have the license. All right, I'm going to choose a user that is not already in G Suite. Well, he's in, so that is a mistake. Hold on just a second. I literally think they were added between the time I decided to do this. Okay, there we go. All right, so I've told it to add these users to G Suite, and if you go down to provisioning, it will tell you that it syncs every 40 minutes. I don't want to wait that long, so I'm going to just hit restart provisioning. I'm going to hit OK. So that takes just a minute, and I will jump over to G Suite and show you how they show up. Before you do this, you need to make sure that you have your G Suite URL. So this is ours. Yours should be similar, but I don't really know. So you need to make sure you have your URL. A lot of schools don't seem to use their URL. So what happens is they just tell everyone to sign into Gmail or Drive and access their options. It's much better if people are actually authenticating through this URL once you do this. And it will take them to a nice dashboard landing page that's a little bit different than your standard Gmail or Google Drive login. You have to create a binding user. I would say this is the #1 mistake that I've seen. This is not hard to do, but what happens is the systems admin for G Suite or Azure who's doing this, they'll just use their account. And it works because they usually have super admin rights in G Suite. So within G Suite, you need a binding user with super admin rights. However, if that person has to reset their email password because they're, a staff member, maybe you have two-factor authentication, maybe they have a security breach, or if that person leaves and you deactivate their account, your provisioning binding breaks. So I normally create users within the Google Suite and even the Azure Suite for these like system functions. So I have a user called Azure Binding. That's the user's first and last name. They have an email account, and I use them to bind Azure to G Suite. If you were doing like LDAP for printing, you could do like printing server as the name and give them an email and use that account for LDAP for printing. And if you're using something like AD or LDAP for like online, like cloud-based radius authentication, you would do the same thing. So you want to make these like fake accounts. And these accounts are also really useful for just testing. You can test all of your cloud features without having to make teacher and student accounts. I use this technique to create shared drives as well. I'm not going to go into that, but for example, I have a user called Science Department, and they have a OneDrive, and all the people in the Science Department have full permissions to that drive. So they can use OneDrive collectively like it's being shared from someone, so it's a much better experience than using SharePoint. And I do the same thing with Google Drive. I make these like generic users to facilitate all these cloud processes. All right, so let me jump back over and see if that was enough time to pull the users in. And here they are. So it pushes them in, and then you select them and you move them into their organizational units. So these are teachers. Now, through this process, these people don't get emails or anything. This is all happening without any kind of like notification system. So they're not bothered by it, and they aren't getting like pounded with requests or anything like that. All right, so that is the general concept. Now, of course, we're going to start with how to build all this, but before we move on, does anyone have any questions about either the topic of SSO provisioning or what you just saw?
Hey, could you check the lobby again?
Oh, sure.
There he is.
Yeah.
No, but that's awesome, Tony. Thanks.
Okay. All right, I have notes over here to the right because I don't do the Azure G Suite stuff every day. So if you see me looking over, that's what it's for. All right, so I'm going to assume everybody who actually has Azure access can get here. To get started, you go to Enterprise Applications, and I have already added it, but you would add a new application, and what you're looking for, and they've changed the name a little bit, so you hit Add Application, and you're looking for Google Cloud G Suite connector. And you need to add it. And after you add it, that's when you bring it up here in this main search box. It's a little strange because this looks like it's the area for adding, but it's not. You have to go up here. It's a nice little extra step Microsoft built for everybody's enjoyment. All right. And this is what the connector looks like before it's set up. Okay. So then you want to go to single sign-on. And if you haven't done it before, it's going to give you a few options: SAML, password base, and linked. You're going to click SAML. One second. My audio driver is cutting out. All right, there we go. You're going to click SAML, and it's going to prevent you with a variety of things that you need to set up. All right. And then you go into basic configuration. And in basic configuration, you need to put in your sign-in URL, and you need to make sure you have this logout URL. And this is where obviously you need to know what your school's domain is. These screens tend to change every few months. They move this stuff around, but generally the concept is pretty straightforward. And Microsoft is changing things because every time I check back, they've actually kind of pre-filled some of this information in. So if you go here and you're missing these are supposed to be populated. You can simply add them. It's sorry, admitting somebody. You can simply add them based on what you're seeing here, but Microsoft is actually trying to pre-populate more of this information. Okay. And then obviously you would save it. I don't have any changes to save. If you're using pure Azure and you're not using a hybrid, you can do a lot more with mapping, and you can do more with scoping. So you can create a group and assign people to the group. And once you do that, as they're added to their groups, they automatically get the G Suite access. I unfortunately cannot do that. So I can't demonstrate that for you. All right, the next thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to need this certificate. So after you're set up, you should get a certificate here, and you're going to need to download it. It should be the base 64 certificate. And then I normally open a text editor and I copy these because you need these for the Google. And you'll see that on this page, and I've kind of changed the code at the end so you can't see our organizational code. I paste all this in here so that I'm ready to go once I get to Google. Because it's kind of annoying jumping back and forth. And, you know, if you're doing all this in one browser window and you de-authenticate or something, you would have to start all over. So I always try to get the required sign-in information into a text document. Okay, and certificate is downloaded. You can test it now if you want, but it's not necessarily going to indicate that it's working. This is literally just seeing if Microsoft and Google are speaking. It doesn't mean that your sign-ins are going to work because obviously we have not set up Google yet. All right. And then you can add users now, or you can wait. I normally would wait. So I would skip adding users at this point, and I would move on to the Google setup, which I'm gonna jump over here to do. All right, so for Google, jump over. You wanna jump into security. And some of the instructions as of late have changed. So Google changed their menu a bit. Everything used to be in here, but now if you're using Azure, Azure is a third-party IDP provider. So you go in here, this is where you put your URLs. Again, if you look at some of the training videos online, even videos from as like recent as November of 2019, you'll see that some of this stuff is not in the same order. So you just need to kind of match. So for example, if you pasted it out, sign in page, this is the code, sign out page, this is the code. So you jump over here and you just match. And you'll see, for example, change password URL. In some of the earlier videos, this was right at the top. So you put in the URLs and then you can upload the certificate that you downloaded and make a note of this, and I'll send it to everybody. If I have it, let me make sure it's over here. Yeah, it's there. This is just something you're supposed to know from Azure documentation. So I've put this in here. If this isn't correct, then the process does not work. And then you would save it. Let me see if somebody's trying to join.
Hey, Colin.
Right. Now this is the first part where we have set up this would basically give you SSO, but again, you don't want that. That was really simple, but at this point, you would have to create all the users here and make sure those users match in Azure. So we don't want to do that. What we do want to do is set up provisioning now so it happens automatically. Now you'll notice I have this user Azure bind, and they are a super admin. You do not have to leave them as a super admin after you do this. If you would like to reduce their permissions levels, do the binding and then go back into roles. And you can create a new role and just give them permission for doing SSO. I think it's SSO app management, and there's one other one. So you actually can make a role that just does this if that's something that you want to do. I have not found that any of these roles can do it. It's either super admin or you have to make a new role. All right, I'm going to go back over here to Azure and let me go to, yep. So once you're back here in your home page, you can click Enterprise Applications and you can find your Google setup again. And you want to go to provisioning. Now I've already set provisioning up. The first time that you set it up, it's going to ask you a couple of questions. Let me see if I can jump over to edit. Maybe it will show us some of those questions. All right, so I've set it to automatic and admin credential. The first time you do this, you have to hit authorize. And this is when you put in your binding user from G Suite. So my Azure binding user, I put that in and the password one time, and then it will work. And then you can test the connection and confirm that SSO is working and provisioning. This is the notification email, and this could be any system admin This makes certain that anytime provisioning fails or somebody is added, that they get a notification. And mappings, again, I can't do these because of the way our hybrid is set up, but you can use the mappings and assign groups. I think the most common method for doing this, if you're in a pure Azure cloud, is that you create a group that has permission to use the enterprise application for G Suite. And that starts to save you a lot of time because you're really just adding people to that group and they're auto provisioned. You can use these enterprise applications and this same SAML concept to do things like your Adobe Creative Cloud. If you wanted to do Adobe Creative Cloud and Google, all you have to do is, again, you set up a group called Creative Cloud, and anyone who's allowed to log in, single sign on to it, you add them, and then it would provision the Creative Cloud accounts for you. All right. Just skipping through my notes here. Okay, I think that's it. So once you've authenticated your provisioning account, you probably at that point, you're safe to go in and start adding users. Now you'll see owners. The owners are people who have permission to come in and manage this application within Azure. So I don't know how you're doing your permissions for Microsoft, but if you wanted to have someone who has just access to this to support it, you could do that. If you've enabled Azure for guest access, you could invite someone in who might be helping you. So for example, if you're working with a network support provider or you're working with a Microsoft engineer, you actually can add them to Azure and then go in here and make them an owner, and now they can do all of this for you, but they don't have to touch anything else in your setup. Self-service portal, I have not figured out a way to do this with a hybrid. So if you have self-service completely configured, then theoretically users can manage their own passwords and it will update between the two. But I know that password management in schools can be quite a hot debatable topic, so I'm not going to get into that. I did really want to try it, but I couldn't figure out how to get it to work with a hybrid. All right. So when you add a user, and you saw me do this before, you simply hit add user, and you have to make this extra step, find the users, and then hit select. Let me see if I can find another one that has not been added. Let's see. So now she's been assigned, and again, if I go to provisioning, it's going to tell me that the interval is 40 minutes, so it should sync up around 11:51. If I want to sync it immediately, I just hit restart provisioning. Provisioning logs, I have not found these to be very accurate. They do seem to work, but sometimes when I pull up the log, it's basically blank. And then an hour later, it's working again. And I don't know if it's our license or if it's just in this preview state. Let me go back here. I'm going to make just a couple of points about the workflow. So what a lot of people do is they get this working and they get really excited. And I know because I've done this before. You get really excited and you go into users and groups and you think, okay, I'm going to add all of the students and just get this done. I don't think that is a good idea. I think that you want to do this in stages. So for example, you want to make your plan based on your organizational units in Google. So I have these simple organizational units, but when I was working at a campus that was all G Suite, my organizational units were broken down a lot more than this. So I had teachers, and then I had the levels they were in. So for example, maybe teachers, elementary school, and then within that, like grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or teachers, high school, science department, math department, etc. The way that the users are put into G Suite is not something that you can predict if you've sent a lot of users over. So if you send 4 or 5 users over, they'll show up here, they're easy to manage. If you send 100 users over, they don't all come in the order that they were in Azure. They just start populating. And you could do 50 and wait 5 minutes and 50 more will show up, or you could do 98 and wait 2 hours and 2 more could show up. I've seen this happen multiple times. So I think the best workflow for this is if you have students and maybe you have an organizational unit for grade 9, you find all the grade 9 students in Azure and you provision them. Wait for them to show up, move them into their organizational unit. And then you just work like that. Provision, let them sync, grab them, move them. Provision, let them sync, grab them, move them. Then you won't miss anybody. And that's pretty important because if you're a Google admin and you've done your apps, you know that it's important that your organizational units are connected to apps that they're allowed to use. And within students, you may have decided for kids in middle school, for example, that they're not allowed to use Hangouts chat, or you might not want them to use Google Vault. I don't know. And this is just the core. This is not all the additional apps that schools get. So what I've found is when people take too many users and move them at once, what happens is they end up allowing students access to apps that they don't want them to have, and then they have to go through and kind of manually prune and see what's happened. So that would be my advice for just a general workflow. Okay, let me see if I have anything else. All right, that's all I have for the initial demo of how the syncing works. Do you have any questions at this point?
Hey, Tony, this is Jeremy King from Cassidy. Question, is this assuming that Azure is going to be your master? Can you set Google to be your master in this instance?
I haven't tried setting Google to be the master. I know that Google added the like Open LDAP or LDAP system, I don't know, like late 2019 or early 2019, but I was using something else to kind of facilitate it. So I actually haven't tried it. However, I can tell you that in terms of like long-term thinking, let me jump over here. And I want to be really clear. I'm agnostic when it comes to all these companies. I think some of them do certain things right and some of them do things horribly. And right now, Microsoft seems to be winning with this SAML SSO stuff for this reason right here. So you'll notice that they've already integrated. Let me see if I can find the Adobe stuff. Okay, so for example, yes, maybe Google can do it, but Google doesn't make it easy for me to just develop a Creative Cloud solution. Microsoft has already built a lot of this stuff for me. So it's very simple for me to focus on these simple menus, get my information, and link it to Adobe. And they've done that with a lot of packages. And this is why, like, I tend to lean closer to Azure being the master. And that's really the only reason. If you're using a third-party system like Jump Cloud or Clever, you might find that those are better because then those can be used to kind of control Office 365 and control G Suite. But I would say the biggest issue is that it is really easy to connect your Azure or your Active Directory to be your login authentication service for devices. And I know Google is offering that now, but they weren't before. Microsoft's been offering it for a long time. And so again, you don't want to get in a position where you're using multiple systems as your like core authentication service. So I still think Azure is kind of winning out. And that's why I haven't really tried this the other way with Google. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to try in the future. It's just that I haven't had a reason to.
Oh, yeah.
Any other questions? So just an example, I was thinking about something like with this concept, SSO versus provisioning. I use this product called Lucidchart, and they have a G Suite integration. So that means I can just use my Gmail to sign on, and I get my Lucidchart, and that's great, and that's single sign-on. But if you're doing provisioning and you were to buy a license for your school or for your company, let's say you bought 100 Lucidchart licenses, you can use Azure to, again, assign those licenses and then populate into the app. And I think that's really the big difference between what SSO offers versus provisioning. And provisioning in general saves you time because you're just making those groups and you're managing your license to applications through Azure groups. And I just find that to be a huge time saver. Any other questions? Is anyone doing any cloud-based printing or cloud-based radius authentication?
Tony, this is Kurt from Bosque School, and we're doing cloud-based printing with a local print server, Microsoft print server, and the connector to Google, which I now know is going to go away. So I'm not sure how we're going to do that next year. So any thoughts on that would be helpful.
So you're integrating with you're integrating
Microsoft print server, and then it has a connection to Google Cloud Printing that runs on the
print. Okay. Okay. What kind of print
is going to go away? So
so you're using Google Cloud Print, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And so yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Now somebody else.
Yeah. It says there's no dial tone. Are you having problems anywhere else?
So my general thought is products, not thinking about products, but thinking about like thinking about the overall.
I don't. You mean phone lines or internet lines?
Either. I mean, because I thought we were doing it remotely now.
We're getting somebody else.
You know, 'cause I don't go and plug in and re-plug in because we've got that thing on the back.
Yeah, I can't.
Yeah,
I can't really hear.
Supposed to connect. Maybe the thing's not. Whatever. No,
I plugged in, replugged it.
Is there any way that you can mute everyone?
Yeah, just mute everyone and then.
Okay. All right. Well, what I would suggest is see if you can find a print server that can use the like LDAP or AD protocol, and then you actually can go in here and you can make your own application. So you can actually build your own SAML with information for your print server. You'd have to set up a print server though of some kind. Jump Cloud, and I'm not pushing this as a product, I told you, it's just something I'm familiar with. When you make users in Jump Cloud, you've got these different ways they can like connect to things in the cloud. So for example, if I give myself permission to use LDAP with my school email, then this is going to give me LDAP settings, and I can put this into a cloud server, and the cloud server will download the Jump Cloud users, and anyone who has permission to use the LDAP can then authenticate. So if you have a cloud server that can use LDAP, then you can use systems like Jump Cloud to authenticate. And it's the same for Radius. So you can go into the user, or you can make a group and you can give them permission to use different things. So every time I add something here, like I can add LDAP, I can add G Suite, I can add Office 365, whatever. As I add stuff, I give people permission either via their name or the group that they're in, and then they can authenticate. So before I moved to the US, we were doing all of our cloud-based printing simply using LDAP authentication. But almost every print server I've seen that supported it also can support Active Directory authentication. So you should be able to facilitate it through your Azure. However, you're going to need to choose a print, like you'll have to choose a print service, because it sounds like when you're using Google Cloud Print, that's your print server. So you're going to need a new print server.
What?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's a Microsoft print server, just with local Active Directory, and then tied into, it's actually tied to a user, and it's just printers at boskyschool.org. And then that user publishes the printers.
Oh, I see. I see.
Google. So it's not even really I mean, it is a print server, but it's tied to this user, and it's using a connector to the Microsoft product.
So I know that PaperCut is very popular. I haven't used it in a few years, but I do know quite a few schools that use PaperCut. It might be something good to look into. And it already has an Azure integration for printing.
Okay, I can look into that. Thank you.
But I can look into it more. I just wasn't really 100% prepared for the question.
No, that's all right. Everybody has their own stupid little situation that they have, right? You can't be aware of everything, so.
Well, I'm going to make a note. I want to look into it for myself.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. Now, Google is offering, they are offering LDAP now, which is basically what Jump Cloud is offering. So if it's, fully featured, then what's going to happen is when you switch over to doing this type of like authentication, you're going to also have data from each individual user. So instead of having one user that's printing on your behalf for the whole school, you can actually start tracking what people are doing and how much they're doing fairly affordably. And I don't know if that's if that's important for your school or not in terms of just looking at the volume of printing and managing cost, but it's a nice kind of free benefit for taking the steps to get it all working on individual accounts instead of using a central account.
Yeah, no, that would be great.
But I'm going to look into it. I'm making a note here. I'll put all these notes out. The video is going to go on YouTube. I'm going to edit it down a little bit, and then I'll put all these notes under the video.
Okay. Thanks.
Anybody else?
Tony, we're pretty much at the beginning of this process. In fact, even our hybrid setup isn't completely set up. But do you want to talk a little bit about either making the jump to the pure Azure AD, or even Because it sounds like if you're at the beginning, maybe it's better, you might even recommend skipping hybrid and getting right to pure.
Yeah, so if I would definitely recommend not putting a local AD in if you don't have one. I would say you want to go straight with Azure. Now, when I started using this technology, it was 2013, 2014, and we didn't have the option of using Azure where I was located, so we had to use an AD plus the, what is it, Active Directory Federated Security System or whatever. And that was all right, and it gave us quite a few additional benefits for managing groups and stuff. But at this stage, I mean, I really see Microsoft kind of telling everybody they need to, unless they have some specific need, they really need to be focusing on their cloud products. I haven't really seen the industry switching back the other way. So that would be one reason to do it. It's just how, if you're going to stick with the product line, I think that's where the product's going.
Yes.
And in terms of like moving from the AD and then getting up in the cloud, you can use the AD Azure connector software to do that. There's going to be some things that are going to be problematic, and what I would recommend is that you choose some users, and you actually can do this. You choose some users, put them in a special group, migrate them with the connector into the Azure, and disconnect them, and then start working through the issues that you're going to have. So one thing that I think you're going to find is like I've seen mappings that are weird. So you migrate and then first and last names aren't where they're supposed to be, or you had these people in departments in the AD and it moves up and the departments are not in the right place, or they're just missing. Because in the Azure, you have a lot of different classifications for people, and you have all these additional fields that you can make to organize people. And the AD is very limited that way, at least out of the box. I'm sure there are customizations for it. The other issue I think that you'll have is password management. So if you're going to use pure Azure, you're in this environment where people are kind of assumed that they're going to be managing their own passwords. So even if you're on two-factor authentication, there's just assumption that the user has some control of their passwords. So if you happen to be manually managing everyone's passwords and manually doing their resets, I think that's going to be a huge like cultural shift for you. Now, it's possible on your local AD to set up self-service passwords. You can do that. People are on premises, they can hit a link and change their passwords. But if your school isn't doing that, that's difficult, because you probably have some users who rely on you to constantly tell them what their password is. And that's going to be lost when you're in the cloud. And before I would do any full move, I would streamline. Like, look at all your groups, look at all your distribution lists, and start really consolidating those down. You can always make them again later, but let's say you have a distribution list with 3 people. I wouldn't migrate that. And not only would I not migrate it, I would probably recreate it after I was done in the cloud as a group and not a distribution list. Because groups work like distribution lists, except they have way more features, and you can do so much more with them. So the more you can consolidate before you sync, the better. And troubleshooting as well. Microsoft has some weird rules for character limits. And I've seen this happen with SharePoint. I've seen it happen with certain groups where certain data and files are not syncing properly, and it's because of the way Microsoft determines the character limit of a folder or a file or a name. And they determine it based off of the root of the cloud tenant. And this is very annoying. And Google does not do this, which is why I prefer Google Drive over OneDrive. I don't know if you'll have those problems because it really depends on the length of your domain name. and how many domains you have listed. So migrating a small number of people and then making sure they're in Azure, they can log in, they can manage their passwords, their groups are correct, they can send emails to each other, they have access, their OneDrive information is moving properly. Doing that, I would say 10 to 20 people max. And then same thing with this concept that I mentioned, Azure to Google provisioning. Provision those local users to the cloud in batches based on some common criteria. Like, we're going to do the math department and the science department. You want to provision, check, confirm, and then do the next one. And a lot of people say that this is a chicken and egg scenario. So the best time to do it is in the summer, but nobody is available to confirm if it's working. So I completely understand that. So if you wanted to do a batch of people to confirm and work the bugs out, you need all the people who are going to be on campus over the summer because they're on a 12-month contract. You need to flag up some faculty who are available and agree to be available to help you test. And then you want to start phasing everybody in that first 2 weeks back and just get it done. Just power through the first 2 weeks back until everybody's done. And that's how I would do it. And the whole thing about needing to do it in the summer because it will cause interruptions. If you do it in smaller batches, you're going to be able to mitigate all those problems. And I would just, that's kind of the selling point though, is either they have to be available during their summer vacation, or they have to agree to have a few interruptions the first 2 weeks of school. That would be my advice. Anyone else?
Hey, Tony, if we have time, can you show us what this looks like with Clever?
Actually, I can't because I'm not using Clever. I just know loads of people who use Clever, and they tell me all the time I need to use it. So let me see, though. Let me see if there's already a Clever. Let me check the gallery. Yep. Okay, so the same setup that I used for G Suite, it's SAML-based sign-on. It's the same steps. They're gonna ask you what your Clever might have a single URL, so they're gonna ask you for the URL you need for the sign-on, and then you're gonna download a certificate. You're gonna go to Clever. You're gonna upload that certificate. You're probably gonna put in the same or nearly the same information that you used for G Suite. So you're probably going to put in your sign-in page, sign-out page, and the change password URL. I would say it's exactly the same. And then you would assign your users. And I'm only saying that because I recently did this with Canvas. I think it was Canvas. Yes. I recently did this with Canvas, and it was the same process. So we set up SAML for Canvas, and this is actually pretty cool because as long as you're authenticated into your school email, Canvas actually is just pre-logged in. So the process every day is log into your email and then click the link to Canvas, and then you're logged in. So you don't even have to really onboard people by having them log in or make any kind of setup. So that was really nice.